Hey guys, it's Di from BeingMommywithStyle, and today I wanted to answer one of the questions I got asked on the question and answer post, and it was actually a really insightful kind of question, and so I wanted to talk about it for a work update for myself, but also just as a larger kind of whole for I think what is the situation for a lot of people out there. And I didn't really understand that this was a possibility until this happened to me. So I wanted to talk a bit about my employment situation post-COVID and what I think a lot of people are doing. So let me tell you the question first. And Ashley asked, in some of your videos you've talked about being furloughed, and then in other videos you've talked about working from home and being on conference calls. Could you give us a work update, and if you're comfortable, maybe elaborate a little bit about the mental struggle the quarantine's had on you? So I'll tackle that kind of secondarily. And I did talk a little bit about that in the question and answer video. But to keep this one mainly work related, so you guys will probably remember I did a series of videos about a year ago where I changed companies. I just felt like my path was no longer at the company that I was at, and the stars really aligned. And I know that's a cheesy scenario, but I kind of opened up to possibilities, and a position opened up at a company that really has meant a lot to me for a number of years. The position was a perfect fit. It just really stars aligned. So I got there, I loved the position. It was a really great kind of challenge position. There's a lot of future potential with the company, and I was really excited to be in the position and having a lot of fun with it. And so that was all kind of pre-COVID. And so then COVID hit, and the position that I'm in and the company itself is a very public company. It relies on the public being able to visit, and it relies on a large stream of traffic, and so it's definitely impacted the business. So unfortunately, one of the things that did happen is there were a number of people that were laid off, and those were permanent layoffs. But before that even happened, our basically entire workforce at work, because we are a public tourist destination, our entire workforce was furloughed. And so what that means is like they were retaining all those employees, but we were able to apply for unemployment and we're receiving unemployment. And the business is actually using that as a strategy to try to help them stem cost in the short term and the long term. And so I think this is what a lot of businesses are doing. So they're furloughing employees. So the employees still have income coming in, but they can actually, it's called partial unemployment, where you are still retained by the company. You still work for them technically, quote unquote, and you're still getting your benefits and all of that. You can only work a few hours a week, up to a certain amount, before you hit a certain threshold, and then you would lose your unemployment benefits. But I think that this is what a lot of companies are actually doing, and a reason why there's so many people that are unemployed. I do think a large percentage of those people probably are laid off fully, but that's kind of the difference between being laid off and being furloughed, is that you can actually be what's called partially unemployed and be eligible for unemployment benefits, and the companies actually retain you and still actually have you working for them as well. So it's really kind of a funky setup. Like I didn't know that it was a scenario that could happen. I mean, I thought you were either like laid off or not. Like I didn't realize there was in between. So it's interesting, or I didn't realize that furloughed meant that you could still work, if that makes sense. So it's been a huge learning process for me, and I think for a lot of people out there. I mean, obviously I think the last statistics, I don't even want to take a guess, but I think it was like 25 million people or something, some ridiculously high number of people are unemployed right now. That unemployment number includes people like myself that are still being retained by the company, but are eligible to claim unemployment, if that makes sense. And so from a business standpoint, I see a lot of companies using this as a strategy to help them stem their own cost, but retain a certain amount of their workforce and get a certain amount of work done. And it's not a huge amount of hours that we're able to work in a week, but we still are able to work some to keep some things going. And then once you cross over that hourage threshold, then they have to fully bring you back on the payroll. But in the meantime, you know, like you can still maintain your benefits, you still maintain that relationship with the company and that sort of thing. So it's definitely been a learning process. I think this is the same thing, that this is an opinion, but I think that this is the same thing that Disney has done, just because I follow a lot of their PR and business people. So not necessarily people that are influencers or anything, but actually people that work directly for their company. I've met them and then I've connected with them on social media. And so I think that's what's happened in their company as well. So they furloughed a certain amount of their workforce. Some of them, they are still having work a few hours, you know, here and there. So they're partially unemployed, so they can still receive their benefits from the company, but also still receive those benefits from whatever state they're in. Obviously for the Disney folks, a lot of them are in Florida and some of them are in California. But so it may vary from state to state too. Obviously mine's very particular to my state. The amount that you can get from unemployment is tied to what state you live in. But because of COVID, there's actually a federal relief part that if you qualify for that, you're receiving a portion that in my state is larger than what you can get from the regular unemployment. And I don't think that's the same for every single state, but in my state, it's a much larger amount than what people on just regular unemployment can get as a COVID relief benefit. So hopefully that kind of explains that. I thought it was a really good question because I didn't know anything about it until I was in the situation. So Ashley, thank you for the question. And I also kind of wanted to talk about like the quote unquote stigma of being on unemployment, because before this, like being on unemployment, like it's never something I thought that I would happen in my life. It's not something I thought I would be like comfortable talking about openly in a video like this in my life. But I think it's definitely a sign of the times that like this is the situation we're in, and companies are actually having to use this as a strategy to stay afloat. So I'm like, if this is going to keep my company solvent, the company that I'm invested in and work for, and you know, I really care about them surviving, then that's great. Like, put me on unemployment, that stems the cost away from them, and I hope that it helps them and other companies survive in the short term and the long term. So this is a tricky situation. It's affecting companies in ways that, you know, I don't even think people know to a certain extent. So you just have to make the best decisions possible. And I think that a lot of business leaders have kind of looked at that as a tool to be able to maintain those ties to their workforce that they need to be able to spool up once we can go back to having public events and the public being able to go out, you know, back to 100% pre-COVID, which I don't think is going to be anytime soon. So anyhow, that's kind of that piece, and hopefully that makes sense. But I'm looking at it as a necessary business tool, and before COVID, I think I would have looked at it and, you know, it almost has kind of like an embarrassment or a shame to it, but it doesn't really have that to me now at this point. Like, I'm looking at it as a tool in a business toolbox, and I think it's being used correctly by a lot of these companies. Unfortunately, that means that a lot of people are on unemployment. But if you can't have visitors come to your company and so you're not able to bring in that revenue, what are you supposed to do? But you can't lay off your entire workforce and not be able to spool up once you can have the visitors. So a lot of businesses are caught in that catch-22 scenario. And so that's kind of, I think, the business reasoning behind it. So hopefully that makes sense. And, you know, it is what it is. We're just making the most of the situation as we go along. But I haven't even, honestly, it's a Wednesday. I haven't even looked at the unemployment numbers today. I don't even know if I should Google it. So about 13.3% Google is telling me is unemployed currently. 20.5 million people in April. So anyhow, there's lots of numbers and statistics that go in behind it, but it's a large amount of people. It's larger than even what we saw in 2008 because such a wide variety of companies have been affected. So I think it's definitely something that you have to look at it as a long-term situation to try to mitigate. The second part I'll talk a little bit about in this video as well, as far as, how did Ashley put it? Mental struggle the quarantine has had on you. So like I said in my question and answer video, you know, I have my good days, I have my bad days. I have days where I feel like I'm going crazy, like just losing my mind, being stuck in the same, you know, confined walls. Some days I feel like I'm very chatty, other days I'm tired of talking, you know, so it's like this. It really is like this. And so the thing that I try to do to get through it is just remember that you know, what the situation is at hand, that there's a lot of people going through this, and also just take it a day at a time. So I feel like if I just take it a day at a time and kind of tackle, you know, a day or two as they come, then that really, really helps, and it helps me kind of mitigate the stress that comes along with it, because a lot of the stress comes from the uncertainty. So I think the uncertainty is a large part of where the stress comes from, but also the stress is just the situation being completely different than anything that we're used to, like always being home and always having people around you. And I just had to stop the video because someone's walking up to my door and like waving their hands at me. So it's like this kind of complete lifestyle change that in some ways is very much a silver lining, because yes, we get to spend more time together, but it's also, you know, that reassertion of boundaries and people being able to have time to themselves and that whole thing as well. So I am working on, you know, kind of self-care and trying to keep time for myself. I mean, simple things like learning to do my nails on my own became something that I could do for myself, that I felt like it was relaxing. It didn't have anything necessarily to do with work or anything like that. It was something that I could just do and kind of vibe out for a little bit. So I think finding something like that, reading, I've been doing a lot of wordscapes, finding activities that you can do to just decompress for a while is really important. That being said, like I miss traveling, like I miss going and seeing places. So I know it would really help if we got to a point that we could do some like mini trips and just have like those little mini trips to look forward to. So I think things like that are important whenever you feel like you can do it safely. But overall, I feel like the situation is going to be a long-term situation. So we kind of just have to take it a day by day, a week by week, month by month basis, and take it a little bit as it comes, unfortunately, which is tough for planners, I know, but it's like I said in the question and answer video, we don't really know yet what fall is gonna look like for school. We don't really know what the winter is gonna look like as far as how much we may or may not be locked down. So we kind of just have to plan what we know and then wait until we know more to plan further ahead. So hopefully that answers those additional questions. I thought it was a really insightful question and might be helpful to answer, because I have talked in videos about, yes, I'm unemployed, but yes, I have to go do work. And so that is kind of confusing. But I think a lot of people also are in that situation. And so I wanted to do a video about it because I feel like this situation has kind of changed like so many stigmas. Like I've seen like people, you know, posting about their unemployment, and like before that's never really something I think you would see someone post about on social media, but it's just a situation that such a large amount of people are in, that I think it helps for people to be able to talk about it. It's cathartic, and for you to understand that there's a lot of people going through the situation. It's affecting people differently, yes, of course, but I think it helps to be able to talk about it, hear each other's experiences, and be able to figure out maybe some helpful things that work for you that you can share with other people and that sort of thing. So let me know if you have any other questions down below, and thanks for watching. Have a great day.